TUFF SHIFT. Hello, world, and welcome to another episode of TUFF SHIFT, the podcast that unpacks all that goes into surviving the job and living the dream. My name is Patrick Murtagh, and guess what? I'm your host, again, just like last week and the week before. And all of them before that, it's me. You're stuck with me. But some changes are coming up, so that's good, right? We love change. We love adapting. And today we're going to be changing up how we do the pre-shift. I'm going to kind of try to keep it on the brief side, which is always the famous last words. Because if you haven't noticed now, as we're going into episode 24, I like to talk quite a bit. I love to talk, but I'm ever the student, always continuing, always wanting to be better at all the things I do. And especially with this podcast, it is newer to me in so many ways. So I'm trying to do my best to bring you the most relatable, the best content that resonates with all of you, whether you work in the industry, whether you have worked in the industry, or whether you have no idea what goes on behind the restaurant curtain, the beautiful facade that is customer service, and you want to learn a little more about what goes on behind the scene. I want to give a little something to everyone. So I'm always just continuing to do a deep dive in the best way to bring you all this information. And part of that is my own research, because now as a podcaster, part of my job is listening to other podcasts to steal everything they do. No, I'm just kidding. I don't steal. But I do get inspired. And there are many amazing podcasts that I just adore, and it makes the homework so much fun. I love Dax Shepard and Monica Padman on Armchair Expert. It is, I'm so happy that they have 3 episodes a week. If you don't know who they are or what they are, well, Dax Shepard, everyone should know who Dax Shepard is. He hosts this show, and his Monday show is always a celebrity interview. His Wednesday show is always an expert in some field of neuroscience, in AI, in medicine, in so many different ways. And just kind of like as an armchair expert, they dig and they pick at these people's brains. And then they have a Friday episode, which is almost my favorite. It's called Armchair Anonymous, where they put out questions to their listeners, and the listeners submit. And if their stories are selected, they get to share. If it's like the prompt is horrible bosses, tell us a time where you almost died, horrible vacation stories, ridiculous stuff that sometimes can be so freaking cringy. It's amazing. And so he brings on 4 listeners a week to share their stories. And it's really amazing the community he has created, him and Monica, I should say, have created. And I kind of want to emulate that. I want to create a community here to where I'm reaching out to you and giving you the best that I can. And so it's this mutually beneficial relationship that we have going on. Another podcast that I love listening to is That's a Gay Ass Podcast. It is, as it suggests in the title, a gay ass podcast where Eric Williams, I hope I got his name right. I follow him on Instagram. I actually started following him on Instagram thinking it was just like a comedy account. I didn't realize that it was a podcast. And so back when, last year when I started doing my deep dive into podcasts, I didn't know he had a podcast. I just thought he was funny on Instagram. But clearly the clips that he was posting were from his podcast. So I've been playing catch up, and I absolutely adore that show. And one thing I've been noticing a lot in these shows that I love and adore and want to emulate is that they don't waste too much time getting to their guests. They kind of just dive right in. And that makes me think. Like, I work really hard on putting this content together for you, but I notice that my stories come to life when I have my guests on. As much work as I put into these pre-shifts and these opening thoughts, the exchanges are so much more meaningful and so much more active when I'm talking, when I'm having the conversation, which is what this podcast is about having the conversations with my guests. The other part of it is, the interviews happen quickly. It's over before you know it. And I'm like, I wish I had so much more time with you to talk. We have so much more left to unpack. And it's like, well, you know, you had about 10 or 20 minutes worth of fat that you could have trimmed to give to your guest. So I'm exploring, I'm figuring things out, and we'll see. We're going to change things up. I'm not doing away with pre-shifts completely, just kind of changing, I will still take some trips down memory lane, share my trauma and opinions with you. And sometimes it's going to be scripted within an inch of its life. Other times it's going to be just off the cuff and straight from the heart. And we'll see, because I think there is value, though it is difficult for me to sit down. I know this sounds bizarre, but this is the reality of self-diagnosed adult onset ADHD, is the thoughts that you have in your head, putting them on paper. It's crazy. It takes a lot of energy. My house is never cleaner than when I'm writing these monologues. I'm updating everything on Instagram, and it's like, you have one job to do. It's a 5-minute story, just write it down, but it takes 3 hours. But I understand that that is a skill set and a talent that is going to be beneficial for me as I continue on as a podcaster and overall as a storyteller and artist. So I'm going to continue that, but we're going to just change things up. Also, I just want to put out there, if you have anything you want to hear from me, if you want to hear my opinions on X, Y, and Z, if you have a story that you want to share, if you want to hear about anything that goes on in the restaurant industry or the world of theater or the world of TV and film, all of that, just slip into my DMs, shoot me an email, let me know what you want to hear, and I'll get that to you. Now, I'm going to obviously preface that with, if nobody sends me a DM, if nobody responds to this request, I'm going to fully make up names and locations of listeners. Like our 100% real listener, Emily in Minnesota. She's our #1 fan. So let's see what questions she has for you in the future. And that's it. That's this pre-shift. But before we get to the guest today, this is the other thing. Especially today, this guest inspired me to kind of switch up my pre-shift, because what I wanted to talk about is 100% inspired by her. So why not have the conversation with her? And that's what we're going to do. But before we get there, I just want to say a quick shout out. This is being recorded the day after the Oscars. And I worked the Oscars. I was not at the ceremony like I was last year, which was a little disappointing because I had a lot of fun. But I was at a viewing party hosted at the Oscars Museum, which was really cool. I don't quite, it sounds fancier than it actually is, because it's a lot of people paying money to go to a viewing party to make it seem like they're part of the Hollywood elite, which I wouldn't do. I mean, tickets were like $85 to $250 based on, what level of whatever you were going to get. And the tickets include 2 drink tickets. And people got dressed up, and that's wonderful. But like, I would take that money and throw a nacho party and have my friends over, because I don't want to be around a bunch of strangers with limited seating and just, yeah, no, that doesn't sound fun. But I'm glad to take their money. I'm glad to pay my rent with the money they're willing to spend. I'm glad I had the job. And like I said, there's the 2 drink tickets, which include red wine, white wine, or champagne. And there was 1 bar to collect the drink vouchers. And then there were 3 other bars that were cash bars that people could get whatever they want. Old fashioned, Negronis, whatever product they had, they could make you whatever drink you want. But if you're spending $85 to $250 on a ticket to go to a viewing party, people are going to eat up those vouchers. Nobody's going to go pay extra for an old fashioned. So again, 3 bars where people had to pay and 1 bar where it was included. Needless to say, we were murdered. We had a line that didn't stop all night. My fingers are full of cuts and scrapes from peeling the foil off wine bottles. I popped so many corks of champagne, running glassware, taking out the trash. It was nuts, but we had an amazing time. Isn't that funny how sometimes the shifts that are just kind of like designed to be the tough shifts can be the most enjoyable? We were busy. We were making people happy. The guests there, it doesn't always happen, the guests were so wonderful and so grateful to us. And unlike other award shows where celebrities don't tip shit, these people were like throwing money at us, and we were just having a great time. We were laughing, we were singing, we were dancing, we were engaging with the customers, and we made it through. So I just wanted to give a shout out to those coworkers. Jesus Christ, I said I was keeping this brief and I already hit the 10-minute mark. I'm sorry. What do you want me to do? I'm Irish and Latino and gay and an actor. I have to talk with my fake New York accent. But we just had a wonderful time. So to the 5 people that were on this teeny tiny bar making dreams come true, I want to say thank you to Thomas. Wait, how many people is it? Thomas, Sam, tall ginger Sam, and then short blonde Sam, John, and the other bartender who we had such a great rapport, and I completely forgot her name. But you know who you are. You work with Staffing Works. You're amazing. Thank you so much for making that shift amazing. And we did it. We killed it. We're wonderful. And we're all going to get wonderful reviews on the Captain's Report back to the big bosses. So yeah, I guess I really won the Oscars last night. Anyways, let's get to today's guest, who is somebody that I freaking love and adore, like truly one of my favorite people. And she is somebody who I have a lot to unpack with today. Though our journeys are uniquely our own, our paths have not only crashed, and overlapped in many areas, but at many different times, they've kind of been parallel. She is an award-winning actress and singer from the San Francisco Bay Area. She has worked at some of the best theater companies, including TheaterWorks in Menlo Park, The Willows, American Musical Theater of San Jose, which I misspelled, but don't get mad at me. They're out of business. What are they going to do? But they were a good company. And the Foothill College Theater, which I have also worked there. It's a great experience. It's a long drive up that hill, but it's worth it. They put on some of the best shows in the Bay Area. And that's actually where she won an award. She won the Bay Area Theater Critics Circle Award for Best Actress for playing Annie Oakley in Annie Get Your Gun. Now, I unfortunately did not get to see her in that production, but thankfully I saw her when obviously every theater company wanted to just grab her up. And she got to reprise that role at the Willows a few years later. And it was so easy to see why she got that award. She is just a phenomenal human being and a phenomenal talent. She's also originated roles. She originated the role of Dorothy in a world premiere musical at the Old Castle Theater in Vermont called Northern Boulevard. Some of the other shows, which I did see her in this, and I freaking love it. A Day in Hollywood, A Night in Ukraine, Cats. That one was weird. I think she'll admit to it too. It was like as if Cats couldn't get weirder. It can. We might talk about that. Who knows? We both kind of have ADHD, so this might be a 6-hour episode. But I just bring that up to say she is a triple threat, because if you've not seen A Day in Hollywood and A Night in Ukraine, those actors on stage are just freaking amazing. They have to be funny. It's a comedy. It is a Marx Brother comedy. They're tappers. They're huge tap routines, and they sing their faces off. She is a true triple threat. She'll try and deny it, I'm sure. She'll be like, oh gosh, no, I really blah, blah, blah. Nope, you're amazing, and I'm gonna make you see that. And she's also been in Full Monty, Merrily We Roll Along, many, many, many others. She's done films, commercials, and even recorded 2 beautiful albums. One, which we'll talk about, is available on Spotify, and one was in this pre-Spotify days, and I hope she gets that onto Spotify, because yes, girl, I remember that album. And now she finds herself working with people learn how to play with their brains to help unlock their nervous systems. And, we'll talk about what that is about too. I've taken her class and it's crazy. Please welcome to the show, the one, the only, my dear friend, Jessica Raaum Foster. Is it? Am I doing the 3 names? Are you being like me? We're all 3 names.
We're all 3 names.
We get paid for that billing, right? We get each name gets its own paycheck.
I think each one has a bank account too. Oh.
That's hilarious.
That was a walk down memory lane, and oh my goodness, you are so thorough. Holy smokes.
Okay, so this is not the first time that this has come up on the podcast. again, if it was a drinking game, I'm about to bring up the questionnaire that I sent to all my guests.
Yeah.
Take a shot. So the brief bio, I need to change it because I say just a brief bio, and people are like, oh yeah, I live in Atlanta, or oh yeah, I am the. And you
I
gave me
have
the
a
brief.
medium length bio,
I
but you
think
basically read it word for word. So there you go.
I'm like, I will. I mean, it's easy because it's you, and I know I've witnessed most of this. But like I say, I am a homosexual Scorpio with Google. I will get to the bottom line, and I have
Dude.
crafted bios for people that I've never met in real life.
Well, yeah, I'm
So
gonna just download that and put it in ChatGPT, transcribe. Or maybe you can just send me a copy.
yeah, I will. I sure will. But how are you, my friend?
I'm so good. This is so lovely to be talking to you.
I'm I am so happy you're here. This is going to be a real fun hour and 15 minutes. I'm assuming that's going to be what we go to. So
Probably.
let's just go because I said I was going to keep it brief, and I didn't. I didn't. And it's funny because other times where I've tried to be like, let me have this like really big old monologue, and it's 5 minutes. So the first two questions are always the
That's the
same.
ADHD part, right?
Is that is that
It's
is that
time.
what it is?
It really is. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
self-diagnosed because like I was like, oh well, I don't have ADHD because like I get, and this is don't cancel me world, but like I get so much shit done in a day. Like I work multiple jobs, I do all these things, but then it's like, but you also don't do everything well, and it's not consistently that you get things done. So it's like the ADHD it's a journey, and so I just assumed I didn't have it, and then through the miracle of Instagram. I was like,
Oh,
I was like reading
oh,
people's accounts, and I was like, what the fuck? What the hell? That's me, like being very productive and being like, highly successful in certain areas and then not in others and having no executive function. Like, that's crazy. So, yeah, self diagnosed on Instagram. Thank you, Dr. Graham. I love you. So, yeah, let's get this started before we go on another tangent, because we're going to talk about ADHD and the human brain later. So the first question, what was your gateway job into this stereotypical life career balance of being a working singing actress slinging hash to pay the bills?
so interesting because this is somewhat random, but I grew up in England, and so I couldn't work. I was an American citizen in England, so I couldn't work in high school. I babysat, but I didn't have jobs until I got back here and got to, college. And I didn't wait tables in college. I just had things around campus that I was doing, all these things. And then when I got to be an actor, and it's funny, I remember being like, gosh, I wish I had some service experience. Like, this looks like this would be a really good idea for me
It
to wait
looks that way.
tables. And it sure does. And like, it's kind of funny. I mean, at that point, trying to think, I actually don't remember what I was doing prior. Oh, I was working in a gym. I just like random jobs. My job resume looks like I have ADHD, but, um, but I couldn't get a job at a restaurant. I was applying and they were like, you have no serving experience. So, that's a thing. And it's like, okay, well, how do I get serving experience? And, I don't know how I got the job at this first restaurant. Um, it was one of those things where I was like, I've got the right personality for this. Like, can't I learn this skill? Isn't this, I mean, you take some orders and you bring food. I can do that and smile. Cool. Um, and for whatever reason, they must have been really low staffed because they hired me. After like a string of no, we need you to, go earn your keep before you come here. And this was a decent restaurant. It wasn't, it was a decent restaurant, decent prices. The tips were good. And I was really, really green, and completely unaware of what this world was like. And so, yeah, I started working there. I think I was 23 when I got my first waiting job. And it went about as well as you might expect. But yeah.
That's
It was that
amazing. And
I felt really proud. That's my point. Like, I got the job, right? It
yeah.
was like getting cast in a show. I got that first job. I got the breakthrough.
Now, is this different? Is this a different place than the one that I know about, or is it the place I know about?
I can name names on this one because I don't have anything negative to say
Yeah.
about them. Is that cool? So
Yeah.
Pyramid Ale House in Walnut Creek. Yeah. That was my first serving job.
Nice.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Because I know that we have a job in common. My first restaurant job
Mhm.
is a place that you worked, but we'll get to that in a moment.
That
And
was your
now
first one. Okay.
that was my very first one.
Okay.
And because I was in the mindset, like, how cool would it be to work at your favorite restaurant?
Totally. And you got
Yeah.
to.
And I got
Amazing.
to. And
Yeah.
just like it changes everything.
It does.
It's
It
not
does.
as shiny. Um, but we'll get there.
We'll
The
get there.
second question I like to ask is there a tough shift that just lives rent free in your brain that stands out all these years later as like a, whew, that was a day. That was a day, and you're just so glad it's over.
You know what's funny? I have two, and one of them is probably a week after I got that job at Pyramid Ale House, and the other is probably a month before I never served again.
Buckle up, everybody.
Um, so the first one at Pyramid Ale House, um, it's an ale house. They serve beer by the pitcher. And it was this warm summer afternoon, and all the business types were outside drinking on the patio. And I was carrying, just walking around serving, thinking, I'm 23, I'm cute, we got this going on, right? Like everything is fine. Everything is fine. And then I don't know what happened. But the next thing I know, I don't know, tripped or something, and I have drenched a man with a pitcher of beer, like just threw it at him. Like I just all over this man in his three-piece suit. He is now drenched in beer, and I have done this.
Mm.
And it's so funny because I actually don't remember what happened after that. I think I blacked out. Like did that really just happen?
Exactly.
I do remember him being somewhat kind, which I appreciate, but
Yeah.
I wasn't fired in the moment either, which was also shocking.
No, I mean, that's the thing. There's only so much a restaurant can do. They'll comp,
Right.
they'll pay for your dry cleaning. You're not the first. You most certainly will not be the last.
No.
When I worked at Cook Shop in Chelsea,
Mm.
um, we had some interesting regulars. Some of my favorite regulars come from that place. Some of my least favorite regulars come from that place. And we had a guy, we'll just call him Mario because that was his name. And I don't give a shit. He was an asshole. And it's like one of those people that, like, are you aware of how people react to seeing you walk in? Are you aware of how people react when they get that little chit, that soigné with your name on it? Like the not the fear, but just like the fuck. People are so disgusted and so disappointed to know that you're coming in because you're that miserable of a human being. You just happen to work a fancy job, have a fancy title, and be important in a very specific industry, and you think that gives you carte blanche to be a piece of shit to everyone else. So it was one of the joys of my entire career and tenure as a waiter when this is the runner who was running the food to his table is one of the best coworkers I've ever had. Like, he is so good at his job. He is so charming. He knows the food. He can carry a million plates. He's funny. All these things. So he's the like least likely person to have this happen. He accidentally just spilled the sauce. Like, the plate was just not at 90 degrees or whatever. Yeah, 90, whatever. It was not being held straight on, and he was dropping the plate off to Mario's. And if you're listening, Mario, fuck you. Just he was dropping off the plate to Mario's guest, and as he leaned in, the juice just went all down Mario's back. Now Mario worked in fashion. Oh, I'm giving away too
Oh,
much information. Um, and so this was even more of an affront to him that you spilled, because I'm sure this was like very expensive, mediocre blazer. But it just like it spilled, and I mean he just like stood up and made this scene. And it's like, we're gonna comp your meal. You get free shit all the time. This is like your kitchen. Like, you come here a lot. Why choose to be shitty? And he just did this whole thing about like, we like, bring me the club soda, bring me this, and like that because he
mm,
works in fashion, he was gonna like, this jacket back to life. And it just to this day, I know that like that's your tough shift, but like that similar experience, I
just
haven't thought about
brought
that
up
in
the
so
PTSD for
long.
you.
It made me like, but it just brought up the joy for me. Like, man,
Uh-huh.
Mario had that coming. So I'm sure the
That's
guy
amazing.
that it happened to you didn't have it coming. But it's balance. It's balance.
It's balance.
Sometimes bad things happen to good people, and sometimes
That's
bad
right.
things happen to people who deserve it.
Sometimes
So
pitchers of beer just happen to you.
right, it's just, and sometimes you could carry a million trays, and a
Yeah.
door and
Yep.
gravity and wind gusts just have other ideas, or you get an
Yep.
itch on your
Totally.
hand, and it's just like, it happens. I
It
dropped a
happens.
tray of wine last week. It happens.
It
Um,
happens.
so what is this? What was this
The second
story?
one.
Oh yeah, let's get into
Oof.
that.
So, so I moved to New York the first time in 2009, which was not the right time to move to New York. In case you don't remember, there was a financial crisis, and Broadway was almost completely dark. Like half the theaters were shut down. And I got a job at a restaurant. I won't name names on this one, but close to like in Times Square. And I am, stupidly excited about this. Uh, except that in the time that I got there and started working, the theater to the left and the theater to the right of the restaurant went dark. So now the number of people coming in has dropped dramatically. So we're already like not making enough money. Um, and I am new to New York, and my expenses are like, I don't know what to do with the expenses that I've got. I've never seen expenses like this before. And basically, I'm just working every shift I possibly can to pay for my rent. And like, I'm not even auditioning anymore at this point. Like, it was going really, really well. Um, but this particular restaurant didn't have computers. Everything was done by hand, mathematics by hand. Now, I have a special skill when it comes to math. I can make 2 plus 2 equal 5, and fully believe that this is true. And I know this about myself. So I was like, how do I stop bad things from happening here? And there were a couple, oopses, $10 or something like that would happen. But this one night, I busted my tail and I made, I don't know, $250 in tips that night, except that I made an error in my calculations on the sheet. And in the end, I don't know how this happened. I mean, I had a ton of tables, but I ended up screwing up. I think it was close to $220, right? Like almost all my tips. And it comes out of my tips because it was my mistake. So I made $20 for the toughest shift I have ever probably had. I mean, I was so proud of myself too, right? Like I had who knows how many tables, but it was more than I was used to. I was killing it. And I finally on that night made the amount of money I was told would be normal, right? For a shift, worth working in the restaurant industry for that kind of money. And it was all just taken away because I can't math. Which I didn't know was a job description for servers, but there
Math has taken down many a server. But it is crazy because, like, in New York, when you go to a diner in New York, and like the old school diners, like where they have like the best bad food ever, and those waiters and waitresses and servers, whatever, it's all pen and paper, and they
Oh
do
yeah.
the tax.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and they're writing down
Yep.
orders. There's no machine. There's no computer.
Right.
Everything is being done like it was in the 20s. It's
Yeah.
bizarre. I
It
couldn't
is
do that.
mind-boggling. No.
And I'm a
No.
bookkeeper, and I couldn't do
Right.
that.
No.
It is
It
nuts.
was Yeah. So
And that was the
that
final
was
straw?
my. It really was. I mean, I think I maxed out my credit card like a week later, and it was game over at that point. So,
Done.
and I, and then I came home and my soon to be Pilates mentor was like, "I'm gonna get certified in Pilates." And it's like, I will, because I never ever want to do this again.
There is no multiplications and additions or subtractions in Pilates. No. That's wow.
It
Wow.
was
And that was
bad.
and how
And
many
this wasn't a diner, right? Like, it's a high-end restaurant. It
yeah.
just didn't feel like putting computers in because they were cheap.
Was it cash only?
Cash? No, it wasn't cash only. They had credit cards.
Okay. So interesting. What an
I know. So I guess
interesting
they had some kind of computers. It's a long time ago now, but not that added anything up. They could just run credit cards.
interesting. That's nuts.
Mm-hmm.
And so how many restaurant jobs in total? I thought you only had Max's. So this is like brand new for
Mm.
me. I thought like, oh, you Max's was your first job, which was my first job,
Oh
and
yeah,
you
no.
you got
Pyramid
your
Ale
fill
House.
there.
No. I had Pyramid Ale House. I worked at PF Chang's for 1 week. I thought I'd take on a second job because Pyramid was a little light. I wasn't making enough money. And so I took on the second job, and we had a pet duck at that point. Um,
Of
and
course.
I was walking through the kitchen, and my pet was like hanging from the walls, and I was just like, I don't think I could do this. It's just I lasted 1 week. I was done. And it was the ducks. It was the plight of the ducks.
That's crazy.
That and
Wow.
two serving jobs was not going to work for this nervous system. So.
It's hard. I mean, and especially like, I know that PF Chang's is a corporate restaurant and corporate
Mm-hmm.
restaurants expect certain things. There's a certain level of knowledge and steps of service and very detailed side work that needs to be done. And
Yeah.
like to have two different menus, two different kitchens, two different sets
Right.
of side work, like
Yeah.
that's a, that's a
It's
lot
a
to
lot.
manage.
It's a lot. So
Um,
yeah, that one. Then Max is. Oh my gosh. Yes, I worked for. I tried. I think I got a job at was it PJ's in New York? I feel like I worked there for 2 days or something like that too. I
PJ
don't remember.
Clark's?
Then PJ Clark's. I think I switched over to PJ Clark's for a minute and then decided I was leaving New York. That, or I didn't get hired and I'm confusing my brain because it was really fast. I definitely was in there, like I was in there for something job related, but I don't know. And then that last restaurant, and then that's it. So 4.
So let's go back to Max's.
Let's
Um,
go back to Access.
how would you describe Max's to our listeners who haven't uh, been there or haven't heard me
Well, it's
talk about it
Max's
before?
Opera Cafe. I mean,
There we go.
um, yeah, it's singing waiters. Singing waiters. All the wait staff sing. Well, not all of them, but most of the wait staff sing. I
And
loved it.
what was your go-to song there?
I had several. Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Uh, what was that other one? Rainbowy. Rainbow Connection. I remember singing
Oh, I
that one
love
there.
that.
Someone to Watch Over Me. Probably Cockeyed Optimist. I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, maybe there was
nice.
a Need to Get Your Gun Thrown in there. I don't remember where in the timeline that fell, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and
those I remember singing.
we had such an amazing musical director there, Joan
Yeah,
Edgar.
Joan was
She was.
amazing.
I mean, we were very lucky. Again,
Yeah.
this was my first foray into the world of restaurants. I didn't enjoy it completely, but I did love singing. I did love singing with Joan because I feel like she helped me hone certain musicianship skills
Mm,
that weren't
mm-hmm.
learned in college. And it was just
Mm,
like, it was such a fun treat to just be able to sing. It did come with a few backhanded compliments. Some of the guests that just don't get it a few
Then
times.
why are
Just
you at Max's Opera Cafe?
exactly, like it's so loud in here. Or they'll be like, as if you're refilling water, and they're explaining to their guests that they brought like what Max's is, and it's like, well, these are the wannabes, and down the street is the opera where the actual singers are. And I'm like, you
Oh,
like,
stop.
I swear to. And then they're like, do you know any Frank Sinatra? I'm like, fuck you. Like, yeah, that's happened many times where I'm like, do you see how I float that
Do
A
you hear
flat and
yourself?
decrescendo? You're gonna call me a wannabe? To hell with you. But what I love most about Max is because one of my main things that I talk about on here a lot is you got to feed your staff. And it's coming to my attention that not a lot of places do. And in New York, it's like so part of the culture. I think it's
Mhm.
actually state law that if you work in a
Mhm.
restaurant, you're required to feed your staff. But Max's didn't put up a staff meal. You got to order
Yep.
off the menu, and the
It's
food
tasty.
there. It was just, and the rolls. Like, what was your favorite thing on the menu at Max's?
The macaroon.
Yep.
I'd get a salad and a gigantic macaroon.
A side
And I would
salad
eat
and
that whole
macaron.
thing.
Because
Yeah,
you had
basically.
$15 to spend, and then
Something
there was
like that.
a dollar more at dinner time because the prices
Okay.
went up on everything for
Yeah.
dinner, even though it was the same thing,
I mean,
whatever.
that macaroon had to have been 1,500 calories. I mean, like, it was
Oh,
so it was the size of my head, and
it
yeah, it was amazing.
huge. And like the eclairs. I remember one, I don't know why, but one time I was like, the ice cream sundae, like that's under $15. And so my staff meal one day,
Was a
and
Sunday.
that Sunday, I mean, if the macaroon was the size of your head, the sundae was the size of my torso, which was quite sizable back then. And what they would do is it was this giant sundae, and they would cut pieces because there's the macaroon and then there's the chocolate
Oh,
dipped
that's
macaroon,
right. I
and
was the chocolate chip macaroon.
they would
I
quarter
wanted
them
that.
up and just
But yeah,
jam
that's
them
right.
into the. Oh my God, I'm
Oh my
so
god.
glad I don't work there anymore.
Those portion sizes were unreal.
It was ridiculous, but it was just so good, and like such a weird experience, and like some of the like weirdest uh steps of service, because I'm not sure if you remember, but they had like Max's customer bill of rights on the back of the menu.
Oh,
And it
that's
was like,
right.
if your food arrives and the condiments, because we had like, to drop ketchup and
That's
like
right.
5 different
Oh my
mustards.
gosh. Yes. The mustards.
The mustard,
The
and
mustards.
the worst side work ever was cleaning those mustard caps, refilling the
Oh,
mustards. It was just so, how is mustard that gross? And it just was, and you're just marrying
especially when it's
mustards.
cleaned out every night.
Yeah, and just like,
Wow.
and you have to soak the mustard
Yes.
tops in like hot
Yes.
water,
Yes.
which was the
Yes.
pitchers that we would serve regular
Yes.
water with, which was just kind of like, looking back now, it's like, so if you ever had to do mustards, it was like you want it to cry. Like, I will do anything else other than that.
Oh
But
my gosh.
how did you get into Max's? Was that like, did
Richard, I
somebody?
think. I
Yeah,
think it was something through Richard, Paula, our vocal
yeah.
our vocal world.
Yeah, so for our listeners, we both studied with the same voice teacher in his voice studio, which was very hands-on.
And how?
We're not going to go there today. But it was very much like this cultish commune, hippie commune, and it was like we were there all week. We would, take private lessons, we would take group classes, we had an open mic that we all went to together. It was this like crazy experience. And Jessica, and when I said sometimes our paths crossed and at other times they were parallel, Jessica has a unique experience that like only her, I, and Paula have, and that's that you also worked for Richard as well. You
Mhm.
did personal assistant in exchange, and I mean, you built roles with him. You discovered so much about your voice and yourself, and I think it's also fair to say that we discovered a lot about spirituality because like we went to all these
Mhm.
like make yourself better camps, um,
Mhm.
which were
Uh,
which
no,
were
Sean, they're you're good enough camps.
you're good enough. And it just and we went through all of that, which it was looking back, I'm like, wow, what an experience that I'm glad I had. Um, but of all the amazing things, you know, I've talked about Richard quite a bit, not on the podcast, but you know, I won an award for the trauma that I've had with that man,
Mm,
literally, for my Mario show. Um, but I feel what I wanted to express and share with you, which was going to be my opener, was a tough shift that you helped me get through.
mm,
Um, because Richard was Richard. He was an amazing human being, an amazing specimen. And he did a lot of great things. He did a lot of good. He built a community. And he did a lot of also not so good things, a lot of bad things. And he helped people. And hello, software update. That's Richard coming in right now.
it totally is.
He did,
Totally
you
is.
know, other things that weren't so great, and he did bad things. And so I like to describe him as beautifully imperfect. He did good, he did bad, and he was and is remembered for both.
Mhm.
And what else we have in common is we famously left his voice studio. We put up boundaries, we put up walls. The hard thing about dealing with people, at loving people with addictions, in my experience, is that you lose them twice. And so we left Richard, and then a few years later, we lost him again physically. And I had buried everything down, you know, with the Irish Catholic part of me that's just like, keep going, you'll be fine, it makes you stronger. And so I got the phone call that he had died, and I was just like, cool, we'll unpack this someday, and
Mm.
just went on with my life. And you went home for the funeral, or for the
No,
first
I
memorial.
was wait, for the first one, I was there when he died, and then
Oh,
I left.
oh,
I went for a voice lesson, and he didn't answer the door.
okay. This got dark.
Uh, but
But
you're
do you
right.
remember?
There was the first memorial was at the Chinese restaurant, and then there was
Yes,
the pretty one, and I didn't get to go to the pretty one.
I was at the pretty one.
Okay.
Um, and you know, this happened like I wasn't gonna be able to get home. I wasn't gonna be able to swing it. And so you came up with the idea like, hey, you know what, if you want to call in, we'll put your on speakerphone, you can be a part of it, da 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 da. And I was like, great. I want to acknowledge I still have unresolved issues and stuff around this man, but I'll call in. And it was one of those like perfect storms where I was working Friday night. I had an audition the next morning before heading back up to cook shop to work again. And it was like that time in September in New York where it's not anywhere near fall. It
Mhm.
still very much feels like it's August, and it's always like, you know, it was just this pressure building. I was like, I'm not going to sleep this weekend. I'm just working too much. I have this audition, and it was just like the humidity that day was just like building, 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 building. And uh, I called in. I got to work, and I said, you know, I just need about 10 minutes because I was thinking it was going to be about 10 minutes. I'm after running around New York City all morning, and I go into the hallway to call in. And in true Richard fashion, he was late to his own funeral. It was nowhere near starting, and you sat there and you said, so it's probably not going to happen that you're going to be able to speak because I know you have to get to work. And you sat there and you just said, do you want to tell me what you'd have to say?
Mm.
And I did. And I swear to God, Jessica, this was like at work. I was like in the hallway, the stairwell, and I just started talking. And it was bizarre because as the dam broke, the humidity broke in New
Oh.
York and a giant storm
Oh,
started.
wow.
And it was just like,
Mm.
it was so beautiful and so perfect. And a coworker like walked in the middle of it to take her break, and she saw me and she's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm just my voice teacher died at his funeral," and like I'm attending his funeral in the hallway. Um,
in a
And I'm
storm.
like,
It's
but
perfect.
but I'll be fine. I'll be fine. And she just like looked at me and she goes, "You're not working." And she went
Mm,
and found the manager, and the manager came in and she's like, "Go home, take care of yourself." Da, da, da. And it was like, and
mm,
it's just like a day that like you really started. And I know that it may sound like a reach, but you actually started my road to recovery and healing with
mm.
that. And it couldn't be more fitting because you shared, like you and I share something that no one
Yeah,
else
totally.
around him knew. And so I just wanted to acknowledge you for that, which is like, wow,
Oh,
talk about the you're good enough camps that we went to. I want to acknowledge you.
thank you, Sean.
Heart to heart. So literally, like
Uh,
that was a tough shift for me that took place in a
mm,
restaurant that had nothing to do with a restaurant, and you were a big player in that. So I just want to
mm.
say thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's interesting how memories that sit so strongly, right? Like that one doesn't sit strongly, but just in you saying it, it's like I'm back there. I can experience every
Yeah,
inch of that and knowing, right? Like, yeah, like you needed to be there, but you couldn't be there. And thank you, modern technology, that you could be in the way that
exactly.
that was needed.
Hey there, just checking in. I hope you're enjoying this episode so far. And if you are, why not leave us a 5-star review and a comment or two wherever you're listening to this from? And don't forget to follow us on social media at Tough Shift Podcast. That's TUFF Shift Podcast. Everywhere, literally everywhere. And just a reminder, gratuity's not included, but tips are always welcome. And you can find our virtual tip jar at toughshiftpodcast.com. That's TUFF Shift Podcast.com. All right, back to the show. And I'm going to want to tie it back. We'll get away from Richard in a second, but I mentioned that he did. You built a lot of roles with him, and you did a lot of work on really just getting mastery of your instrument and your talent, your palette of talents, and how to use them. And that ended up leading you were a very sought after musical theater performer in the Bay Area. Like companies were, yes, they were companies were you were were on fire. And what
Yeah.
was it like, when you found out that one, you were nominated for an award, two, you won the award, and then you got a chance to go back and play that role again because the theater company
Mm.
was like, that we need a piece of that. So will you kind of talk about that journey, because being an actor sometimes is not the most rewarding experience, and you had an amazing experience.
That was an incredible journey. And it's, I'm emotional now thinking about Richard and building Annie Oakley and knowing how to build a role like that. Not to walk into an audition with some idea of what the show is, but to have that role in my body walking
Mhm.
into that audition. And you know, I I just really credit him for that level of professionalism as a, what was I, 25-year-old actress that had so little experience. But, when I walked in there and I did that audition, he asked me afterwards, how did it go? And I was like, I honestly don't know. Like, I just it just felt so easy that I couldn't tell if I had nailed it or not, right? Like it was just one of those roles that fits like a glove. And I didn't have to try very hard. So this, all of this working and working and working to do something, and then you get that role that's just meant for you.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not gonna say it wasn't work. I put a ton of work into it, but um, Jay Manley was the director on that, and he and I, it's the only show he and I have done together, but he and I are still in contact. Like we had lunch recently, and um, just really adored working with him, and the cast was amazing. And it was the first time I had, well, no, I had done Peggy Sawyer prior to that, but it was one of the first times I had a lead role like that, and I took it very seriously, and I loved every second of it. And it's so interesting because I think maybe the coolest part of it was coming out afterwards, and there'd be these little kids, little girls in particular, that would get to meet Annie Oakley, and you know, just the stars in their eyes, getting to be a part of the story in that way was so cool. Winning the award. There's just moments. Now that I've been on the planet twice as long as I had been at that point.
It's weird to think about that.
There's moments where things line up and everything goes well. And that's not how life goes all the time. But there are those moments. And it was actually, although I say that, and it's hilarious because I was actually driving across the Dumbarton Bridge and my car disintegrated. Like, it just fell apart on the bridge. And while I'm dealing with this, my mom calls to tell me that my picture is on the front page of the Chronicle. So this is before the award. Like, they do stories of theater, in the Chronicle a lot, but they rarely put it on the front page. And for whatever reason, they decided that I was going on the front page of the Chronicle with a story about the show. This is not a big equity house. This is a college show. I have no idea why, but that was amazing. And that I've actually stayed in contact with that journalist. He's great too.
You do not want to cut that contact.
No, it's great. He doesn't work there anymore, but he was amazing. And then I got nominated. And again, like, I was green. I was non-union. I was up against there was a famous person up for that role. There were people from big equity houses that were up for roles. And somehow there was, again, it's like when it's lined up and right? Like, there's just that everything is in the right place kind of feeling about that show for me. And the fact that it was recognized that way validated it, right? Like, oh, I'm not wrong. This is really working, what's happening, the magic that's happening here. And so, to win the award on top of it all was shocking. Like, I just did not anticipate that, but it happened. And for that moment in time, I got to feel like I was on top of my game, and that, and no one can take that away from me, right? Like, that moment, I got to feel like, no, I can do this at a really high level. And they all said I'm right about that. So, and even on the days I don't believe it, they said I was right about it.
and the proof was in the pudding, because it wasn't just winning the award.
Right.
It was then booking more work, and booking work as an equity actress in San Francisco, which is a very small pond, and with very limited numbers of equity contracts available. So they can't take any of those things that happened. Now, I know, not everything is transferable in New York. So you have all these things, and you go to New York and you show up, and it's like, holy shit, there's like 2,000 of me here, and holy shit, like, the monitors are rude, and holy shit, nobody's paying attention behind the table, and I have an award on my resume. So I
they have 5.
I understand that, like, not everything transfers when you get to New York, but was it something that just kept that fuel lit, where it's like, again, they can't take this away? How did that kind of shape your journey in New York, coming there with all these things crossed off your to-do list?
Really, your perspective is so kind. I think because I didn't go to New York feeling like I was. I went to New York feeling like I was ready at first. And I booked the first show I auditioned for, and that was that show in Vermont. And I was on top of my game, and I felt amazing. And then I went and did that show in Vermont. And during that show, I had a major life event that is not for this podcast, but that dismantled something inside of me that needed to, I don't know that it needed, it broke something. And it's really interesting because I came back and I never got a call back again. In my 6 years in New York, I never got a call back again. So,
Wow.
and it's fascinating because not getting the callbacks and having that credit and going, I am good enough to do this, made me lean more into the technique, made me lean more into, well, I've got to get better, right? When in fact, what I probably needed was one of those you're good enough workshops in those moments.
I was just
To
about to
be
say,
like,
like,
you're a flawed human being. It's okay. Um, and yeah, I mean, there was so much more going on, and I saw the business for what it was, and I had some decisions to make about how I wanted to interact with that. But at the end of the day, what got me the success in Annie Get Your Gun was that I didn't know any better than to bring
mhm,
everything I had
yeah,
and to be myself, right? Like all I had to do was show up and it was done. And I had skills, I know how to do the work, but I confused
yeah,
the win with, oh, I've got skills and that's why I got this, instead of, in the moment, if you'd asked me, I knew it was more than that. I knew it was that I had landed in a role that allowed all of me to shine in a way that not every role will. So there's that. Um, but yeah, that shining piece. If you walk in at half wattage, it's what Richard taught all the time. If you walk in
yeah.
at half
Oof.
wattage, it doesn't matter how you sound. And I just happened to go to New York during one of the most broken chapters of my life. And, it made me stronger, and it showed me exactly what I needed to see. In terms of, I do this work not because I want to win awards. Um, I don't care about fame and fortune. That was never what was driving me. What drove me towards fame and fortune was that I wanted to get paid to do what I do so I could keep doing it. And I wanted to know that I was working at the top of my game. And yeah. And so that was what was motivating me.
Yeah,
And if you weren't going to pay me to do it, then I was just going to stay in class and just keep making sure I was playing at the top of my game. But it's not the skills that matter. They matter. But I do this because that's who I am.
yeah,
And that's that light, and that energy is who I am. And if I don't bring that, then it's interesting. My voice doesn't even shimmer the way, they're just little pieces of tissue, but they're juiced by my soul, by whatever it is that comes through this, whatever this entity is I
yeah.
call me. And it's so interesting. I'm doing a show next weekend. It's the first show I've done in 12 years. I have not done a show since that Vermont show. And I'm playing Little Red Riding Hood in a children's theater production. And I could not be more excited.
Mm.
Could not be more excited.
It's
My
very.
daughter's gonna come see it. Like,
Oh, that's one, and which is, I mean, wow, even more. I was just about to say, all roads lead back home. Is that's what this is giving, like getting back to not just working and being physically,
right.
home, but like to the joy, just the sheer joy of performing. And then you add on the fact that as you mentioned with Annie Oakley, that all those children with stars in their eyes getting to see Annie Oakley after the show, and now your daughter
Like, yeah.
gets to see mom do this.
Yep.
That's amazing. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
It
Um,
really is. And the chapters of my performing where it was all about the theater company and where this show was going to take me next, right? Like there was that element of, and I mean, I'm not that cold, but like that was a big deciding factor as to whether I would take a show. It's not that anymore. I don't have
yeah,
to. I have another job, but like it needs to light me up, or else,
yes,
or
yes,
else it's going to hurt. And it's probably not even going to be that good. So
It takes a lot out to not give as much back.
yeah.
And just to kind of touch on what you said about the fame and fortune and all that, it's it's a way of looking at the business, not necessarily even just for the fame and fortune of itself, but I think you kind of touched around it to where it's like it's really just a strategy to secure more work. It's like I want to, like you
Yes.
said, I want to get paid to do this so I can do it, but I also want to, like, if I hit this, then I can continue working and I
Yes.
can continue to have this momentum. And it doesn't, that's a good strategy, but it's not a perfect strategy. And it's worth throwing effort at, but it's again just as risky as anything else.
Well, I think one of the
Um,
breaking points for me was I had a friend, not a friend, but someone I knew who was waiting tables. And then she finally got the Broadway show, did the Broadway show, and went back to waiting tables.
yep.
And I was like, oh, right. There isn't a line in the sand where you are done hustling in this business. It is, you've never made it.
And that's part of the
Mind
stereotype.
boggling.
That's part of
Right.
the stereotype, especially in New York, and we glorify it and romanticize it when it's something that happened, back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. But it's
Right.
still very much what happens where, oh, my national tour is done and I need a job.
I
And
need a job.
exactly, exactly. It all comes to that. But I want to talk about, one of the experiences, whatever New York was or wasn't. Nothing in New York is done in vain,
No,
because certain experiences led you exactly where you are now. You ended up
totally.
meeting people and having experiences. So can you kind of talk to how you found your way, to just tell the listeners what you're doing right now, what
Yeah,
your new career path is, and how performing, not that performing in New York led you there, but
it did.
pursuing
It
performing
directly
in New
led me
York.
there.
Yeah. So can you share with our listeners
Yeah.
that?
So I now call myself a Neuro-Playformance Coach.
I like
Uh,
that.
toot toot. um, it doesn't matter what I call myself because most people at this point still have not experienced what I do. So, but basically, I use applied functional neurology to get people to do what they want better, get out of pain and up level performance. And yeah, if you'd asked me if I was going to be spouting neurology, uh, 10 years ago, 13 years ago, I'd be like, no. Um, but I am. And yeah, it is a direct connection. So, I think having had this conversation with you, how I would language it is, sorry, I'm gunky. There was all through my performance career, with the exception of moments of that Annie Oakley performance, where it has felt like a battle between the gift, right? Like, this is what I'm here to give, and then this fear, this inferiority complex, whatever it is. I'm not good enough. This isn't going to work. I don't get this, all of these things. And how that manifests, I mean, that's normal. Like, it's just, we have these little angels on our shoulders that have different narratives running. But for me, how that was manifesting was I would go into an audition and not trust myself. If I can feel the energy line up and everything's great, you're going to get one hell of a performance. But if that energy is not lined up, it might actually suck. Like, there's a big difference between Jessica at full watts and Jessica not. And I was starting to not trust my well-trained instrument. And was starting to lose faith a little bit that it was not going, some of the vocal issues were not going to resolve some of these things. And so I was getting worse and worse performance anxiety walking into these auditions. And part of the reason I decided to move to New York was because I figured if I auditioned more, then I would get over this. So I was like, and in the Bay Area, I was only getting a few auditions a month. And I was like, okay, if I go and I can do a few auditions a day, then maybe this will become a thing of the past. And so I went, and in fact, it got worse.
Hmm.
Now I'm, the stakes are higher, right? And I'm realizing if I want this to happen, I better come in with everything I have. But I keep asking myself to do things I'm barely capable of doing, right? and hoping it goes well. And so, but this performance anxiety and this feeling like I don't have full control over myself, much less my instrument. I felt like I would vacate my body. That's how I would tell the story. Like I could sometimes not even phonate, and it was just mind-boggling to me. And I had done all these self-help workshops. I had done meditation. I had tried medication. I had done, everything, and it wasn't getting better. But somehow, I think 5 months into being New York, my voice teacher there had another student who was doing this Z Health for Singers workshop. Z Health is the company that I got educated with. And I had already gotten certified in Pilates at that point and was using it for performers. And I was like, well, let me go check this out. And I went, and it was a 45-minute free workshop, and my life changed. Like in that 45-minute workshop, she had me do something with my eyes. And all of a sudden I was singing in front of this group of people as though there was no block. Like all of me was available, and I wasn't scared, and it was easy. I was like, okay, well, that was something. And the next day I had an audition for a national tour of, I think it was A Christmas Story. And I went in and did the eye drill before I went in. And I sang my high F, belted it like I do in the shower, but could not for the life of me seem to do in an audition room. And okay, that was great. And then they asked for a legit piece, which I was, normally would make me want to crawl into the hole and disappear. And it's like, of course, and pulled out my soprano piece and sang it like a lark. And I was just like, I don't know what just happened, but I'm going to need to find out more about this. And so I started training with her, and pretty quickly figured out that there were some somewhat severe deficits in the way my eyes were communicating and in my vestibular system, my onboard balance system, that were literally causing the signals of my nervous system to get all muddled up. Like the wires were crossed, and I was getting cross signals, which was hard enough walking through life, especially in downtown New York. It was hard enough waiting tables with, all of these things, but walking into an audition where this matters to me more than anything else, it would short circuit and I would cease functioning. I was not making it up. This was an explanation for what was happening. And so I started training with her regularly, but she was expensive, and I was broke, not even waiting tables at that point, just completely not working. I'm going, all right, well, how do I make this happen? And I decided I was going to go into the certification because that seemed cheaper. And I did. And things started getting better, like instantaneously and then continuously, right? Constantly seeing progress. And in order to pay for this training, I started looking around for a job, and I got hired as a trainer at the Jewish Community Center on the Upper West Side because they knew Z Health, they were totally into it. And here they have this person that's willing to go get certified for the next however many years. And I got to work with people in that facility, and I started like changing people's lives. Like people with chronic pain, they'd do one drill with me and for the first time be able to move. People who, it's just one story after another like that. I'm like, this work is so important. What do I do with this? Like this can't just be secret. And I also felt like Z Health was geared for elite athletes, and I wanted it to be a part of mainstream. It had changed my life. It had given me my life back. It had given me, I say that dark period. Yeah, I came out of it, and I came out of it largely because of this work. And it was all physical, which is so fascinating. But so, yeah, I went through for the next 6 years, I was flying to Phoenix 5 to 6 times a year. I actually, that voice teacher, Andrew Byrne, ended up deciding he was going to get certified as well. And so the two of us went, we would do all these trips together. And so you had all these elite athlete coaches doing all this physical work. And then you have Andrew and I and our friend Rezi. We called ourselves the Gay Neuro Trio. And we were over there like striking poses and using the work to improve singing. And And so it was such an incredible chapter, like just so amazing. And yeah, it stopped me from pursuing the dream directly, but I had this
Yeah.
other dream. Um,
And it's an
yeah.
amazing thing that you do. I experienced it. I took a class with you in San Francisco when I don't even think maybe you moved back. Maybe I was. It
No, I
was over
hadn't moved back.
Christmas.
I
Yeah,
was
and you.
pregnant and didn't know it.
There we go.
Oh
And
no, I
it
was
was,
pregnant and knew it. I was a month pregnant. I was a
but we
month
didn't
pregnant,
know. I think.
but you didn't know.
Um, and it was bizarre. So this was like after my Christmas concert, and so I imbibed, I celebrated, and knowing full well I had to go to this course, but which I wouldn't recommend to people. I'm not saying to do this, even though I got away with it. Um, but I had just done
But if you do,
Bob.
I have tools to help.
Well, that's what happened because I had just done Bobby and Company, and so I was like, I'll do this song, and I just couldn't do it because I was dehydrated and I had done 3 Christmas concerts and all these things, and you gave me these tools to kind of work around it, and it's like bizarre stuff, like putting on different. I mean, I call it bizarre not as an actual judgment, but because it seems.
I like to say I'm here for the revolution of the weird.
Yeah, and it was just like put on these red tinted glasses. Now put on these blue glasses. Now stand on one foot, and all these crazy things that are just like, well, that would I'm not feeling anything. What's the effect? And it's like, and like everything just comes out, and it's like that's amazing. And I wasn't again in the same way that I wasn't surprised. When you won your award, just always amazed. I wasn't surprised that any of this was going to work because we had done Richard's stuff, and just for the listeners to know what we did, we in our group classes, we put belts around our midsection to kind of map out our diaphragm and lean against. We did squats holding on to a partner's rib cage and doing breathing exercises. We put a tennis ball on our lower abdomens and did workouts with that. We did we breathalyzers that they give you in a hospital to reshape your lungs. We worked with those. There was a bust. I always say it's Beethoven. I'm not sure if it was Beethoven, but there was that giant bust that we would carry up and down stairs while singing, pushing the piano around the studio. We did weird. We sang with Easter eggs in our
And all
mouth,
very physical, very sensory
all very
oriented.
physical. So it's
Yep.
like you were carving this out with Richard long before, like, so it and that's why it didn't seem strange to me
Right.
either. And also
Totally.
I was also in a gym cult for a little bit
That's right.
in in New York, and they were very much about the nervous system and all this, and just explaining like your body, like we live in this fancy society that we've created, but our nervous system is like the original software. Like it doesn't know that you're swinging
Yep.
kettlebells. It doesn't know that this is just an audition. You're not going to die. Your nervous system is like, I'm protecting you. And you give these tools. So as we wrap up, I want to kind of, how can people find you and the work you do? Talk about your business a little bit, and who should find you. Like what
Yeah.
would lead someone to exploring Z Health? So if you can
Yeah.
let our listeners know.
Yeah. Um, so it's actually been a very fascinating business adventure to try and answer that question because it can be used for anybody, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I want this information to be available to anybody because everybody has pain and everybody has something that they're trying to do and they feel like they're beating their head against the wall to do it. So it can be used for anything. I love working with singers. I love working with performers. A lot of my clients are in the industry. And I have people with chronic pain and, my current sort of main niche at the moment seems to be ADHD cognitive function, mixed with anxiety and overwhelm.
Mm.
And, it's interesting when you get into the business world, they start talking about avatars, right? Like, who are you marketing to? Well, me, right? Like people like me who feel like they are swimming upstream 24/7 and don't know why and can't get a diagnosis and something is wrong, but we don't know what it is. Like there are things that can be going on with the nervous system that are causing that to happen um, without our even knowing it's happening.
Yeah.
So the way I'd recommend finding me I'm on Instagram, and I have a ton of reels on there, which can give you a sense of what this work looks like a little bit, just to get a sense of it. But I have found that sharing reels remains very theoretical. People watch them. Some people will try them and get a result, but every nervous system is so individual that I don't feel like I'm serving people with that necessarily. So I actually just launched an online community. It's called the Nuero-Playground. It's completely free to join, and I still share the reels there, but we're talking about but there's a practical piece to it. Like, okay, I want you to try this, and I want you to tell me what happened here. Currently this week I'm running a 5-day focus challenge. So we're meeting every day. I'm going to keep doing events like this every month, so that people can experience this, because until you experience it, it is weird. It does not make sense. But I want to be able to share these tools and help tailor them to the person sitting in front of me so that it works for them, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if you go to Instagram, Jessica Raaum Foster, the link to the Nuero-Playground is in my bio, and you can DM me, as well if you have questions.
And it'll also be in the description of this
Great,
show as well. So
perfect.
whatever you're listening to, if you're listening on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, any of those things, there will be a description with her Instagram handle,
Yep.
because try and spell Rom. You won't find her. Trust, as
Nope.
somebody with a name that people like, my last name I think is a little like, it's not a competition, but my last name is like a little easier to like kind of spell. People still mess it up, and they also mispronounce it.
Yep.
So I know. So
Yep.
just don't try and spell wrong. Look how I spelled it.
Just go
Um,
click
and
on the link.
and hopefully, knowing me, I actually spell it right. So to
Just
follow,
copy and
copy
paste.
paste. Um, and the last thing I want to do is I like to end the show, as you know, bad news gets back. It has a faster and longer life than good news. It makes its way around to everyone that doesn't need to hear it anyway. And good news doesn't always get there. So that's why when I'm at work, I always like to acknowledge when somebody goes above and beyond. When I have a tough shift, that a coworker, a customer, somebody makes easier, whether this is in a restaurant, on stage, whatever. I like to acknowledge to management. I like to acknowledge to that person themselves, and give them a shout out for the amazing work that they do and for making my life a little easier. So is there anybody in your life, it can be for any reason, it could be from your waiting days, from your performing days, currently now at Z Health as a mom, is there somebody you want to acknowledge who has made a tough shift in your life a little easier?
I mean, do we have all night? I feel like there's angels everywhere.
There are angels. Well, we'll start with one.
Let's start with one that made a tough shift easier. There are those people in your life that love you no matter what, and that you turn to in those moments. And one of my best friends, Jill Sabak, is coming to mind just as I think about like that chapter we were just talking about, and that there's that, and I can say this about you too, right? Like that there are people that know you in these different stages of life, and it's still you, but you've changed,
Yeah.
you've shifted. Yeah, so I'll call out Jill, but then also just this conversation, Sean. Like, I don't always go back and revisit some of those stories, right? They're in the past, and yet they are a part of who I am.
Yeah.
And as this year feels like it's going to be a big shift for me.
Mhm.
And I am doing a lot of work in integrating those pieces of myself, right? So that all of me gets to come into whatever this is. And so, yeah, I mean, I just love that we have this long friendship and this ability to look back at baby Sean, who was, crying in the hallway, and baby Jessica, who thought a star had been born and that was it, and there was nothing. We're off to the races. It's
We're
all
off
done.
to the
It's all
races.
set.
Well,
Yeah, like
I
it's
I'm gonna leave it for Jill. I appreciate your kind words, and I love it. But you know, I'm a tenor. You don't give us any more praise than we need. We have too much confidence in that area. I thank you for everything you're saying, because even just going back and like what I thought, like, oh, I mapped out this episode, and then even talking, it's like, oh, all these other areas you showed up for me as a friend, and you showed up here, and you got me through this, and just experiences that like you would never expect the two of us to have so many things in common,
Right.
and you have always shown up. But we're gonna leave it to Jill. She gets a shout out today, so I just want to thank you, Jill, for everything that you do. God, I sound like I work at Cafe Gratitude, which is a great place. um, I want to thank you for everything you do, who you've been to Jessica, and clearly the world needs more people like you.
Mm.
This has been another episode of Tough Shift, and just remember, tough shifts build character, and character is what brings your story to life. Take care. Tough Shift was created and hosted by Patrick Murtagh. It was recorded on Riverside and distributed with Buzzsprout. Don't forget to leave us a 5-star review and maybe a comment or two. And remember, tough shifts build character, and character is what brings your story to life.